Let's talk about clean diesel. Why is that important, Vickie?
It's important because diesel has a very serious health burden. It affects Americans' hearts and lungs. There have been a series of studies, including some leading studies here in the Los Angeles basin, a series of risk assessments indicating that diesel exhaust is responsible for more than half of the cancer risk that's associated with all air pollutants. In the face of that evidence, there's a question for policymakers and for big diesel engine companies, what next? And one of the things that I hope we get to talk about, Sarah, is just sort of the effort and the partnership of people to work together to try to address what is a serious health concern, and that is the adverse health and environmental impacts associated with diesel exhaust.
Can you go into a bit more detail about what the adverse health and environmental impacts are?
So diesel exhaust is discharged through some very small particles that can reach sort of deep into the lungs and can kind of escape all of our kind of typical defense mechanisms, and that can have serious cardiovascular and respiratory problems. And diesel exhaust also has contaminants that sort of adhere to the particle, the central kind of core particle, that have toxic attributes. And so when that's breathed in, that has also serious health effects. So there are concerns about both the impacts due to sort of the particulate, but also sort of the contaminants that are absorbed onto the diesel particle.
That's why we're so proud that we've really reduced those particles coming out of our modern engines to almost near zero levels. So we actually say they're de minimis. And that, in fact, the emissions and the particulate level emitted by today's diesel engines that are being manufactured are so low that when we are testing that in our laboratories, the diesel engine manufacturers, we had to put in air handling equipment to essentially scrub the air in the lab, like the air we're breathing here today, before it got intake to the engine, because if we didn't do that, just the debris in the air, you can't see it, that we're breathing here, would actually have a measurable impact on what we picked up on the filter. It's just, they're very, very clean, and it really essentially eliminated those on the modern engines. And as the new engines are purchased, the old engines retired, and we also offer retrofit packages and have a very active business to go out and work with customers to help them with retrofits. And I think that's been one of the areas where Vickie's organization and industry, have collaborated, and I think that's one of the important things is as we think about the environment, we think about businesses, to realize the sustainability of both can go hand in hand. And just as Hillary Clinton used to say about raising a child, it really takes more than just one person, to do that. It really takes a whole society, and all of us working together. But they've been a great partner in helping to lobby for some of those programs to make those retrofits easier to do.
Let's talk about that collaboration, because, as you say, there's been phenomenal progress with clean diesel. I'd like to understand the time frame that change had happened, actually. How long are we talking to?
Well, when it started, I was as young as some of these young women, and I wore a ponytail and khakis to work every day, and I had naturally blonde hair. So really, it's been about a 20-year journey. And in that time, we've reduced the measured emissions, or the primary regulated emissions of oxides of nitrogen and particulate matter by 96%. I think you'd struggle to find any industry that's cleaned up their emittance, whatever they might be, any more quickly than we've done.
Yeah, it's a phenomenal case study. So let's talk about the collaboration, because it takes industry, non-profit, government to all kind of work together on this. What's been the framework for the success?
Well, the success really has there are two pillars of progress, and that is really the push from the community, people in communities who are deeply concerned about a safe, healthy environment, health advocates, scientists, and then the engineers who kind of make this sort of transformation possible, and all of the policymakers, of course, who help lead the way. And the two pillars of progress have really been the adoption of a series of national scale emission standards that have kind of put our country on a trajectory to reduce dramatically the pollutants that are discharged from new diesel engines. And it's been an incredible collaboration with leaders at the Environmental Protection Agencies, leaders in the private sector, leaders at the grassroots, at the community level who've raised enormous amount of awareness and concern about these issues, and people kind of working together. One of the attributes of diesel engines that we all are very familiar with is their durability. And the fact that they're durable and long-lived also presents some challenges, because you have these engines that are on the road and operating in our nation today that have all of these economic benefits that are also not sort of fully deploying kind of the made in American sort of solutions that can help deliver cleaner, healthier air that we're going to see as these new engines sort of are manufactured. And so one of the other challenges that this community has been working on is how do you kind of hasten the transition? How do you both make sure that the new engines that are manufactured are deploying these advanced technologies, and that the diesel engines operating on the road today are also cleaning up as we wait for the fleet to turn over. So it's about making sure new engines are as clean as they can be with these advances in technologies, and trying to hasten the transition to cleaner, healthier air by cleaning up collectively all of the engines operating on the road today, and that is no small task.
And a good example of that collaboration is something here actually in California called the Carl Moyer program. And what this did, it was a California program, and what it did was it provided state funding to people who owned, businesses who owned these older diesels, and provided them with some financial assistance so that they could go and do a retrofit. And in many cases, when we participate in the Carl Moyer program, we'll bring a machine up, maybe 10 years in advancing, its state of clean technology. There's also been one called the Diesel Emissions Reduction Act, and that's a federal program that provides funds for this kind of update. And the great part is it cleans up the environment. The customer is happy because he gets a refurbished machine and it's got another, 10 years in its life, and then it's also good for business.
And Sarah, in a world where there's been too much attention and too much discord about polarization in Washington, D.C. over really important environmental protection and sustainability issues, this is an area where there's been an enormous amount of bipartisan collaboration. The Diesel Emission Reduction Act passed overwhelmingly in the United States Senate, and it's been implemented in a collaborative way sort of across the country. $500 million of American investments, and for every one of those dollars that we've invested as a country in trying to provide these clean air benefits in communities, our country has realized over $10 in public health protections. That's a very good investment. The challenge is, we don't have enough money to sort of clean up all of these engines. What are all of the ways we can sort of work together to innovate in communities and neighborhoods to sort of secure these cleaner benefits sort of sooner rather than later?
See, for me, this case study makes a lot of sense. Here is industry wanting to innovate, wanting to improve the technology, and everyone benefits, right, from an economic level, from an environmental level. What can other industries learn from this? Because I work in clean technology, and I know that there are these fabulous clean technologies that are better for people's health, and yet it seems like not all industry is as enlightened as perhaps the diesel industry in adopting change.
I guess I'll make a comment. I'll go back to the previous speaker, who was not only informative, but she was highly amusing. But cattle prod, not the answer here. To me, it's all about the power of and. It's about being creative. First of all, committing to a common goal, and maybe Vickie'd push a little bit harder than we'd want to push, but committing to a common goal and being committed to that power of and. It is possible, good business and good for the environment. And we did hear that from our last speaker. She said waste is money. Yeah. And that's, that's true. We all have a common interest. We have to look hard and work hard to find those interests.
Absolutely. I wish all industry was on the same page, but hopefully slowly leading by example is always a good thing. Let's talk about those legacy products that we brought up earlier. So they're the diesel vehicles on the roads already. For example, school buses. That's one that you always see because there's children inside, and they're not always as clean as they possibly could be. How long will it take to kind of clean up all the school buses, for example?
Do you want to take that?
So the school buses that are being manufactured today are more than 60 times cleaner than the school buses that were sort of manufactured 20 years ago. So The new buses are just much, much cleaner, and we do have a big legacy fleet. And there have been a number of communities that have helped clean up that legacy fleet through this joint public-private partnership through the funding of the Diesel Emissions Reduction Act. There are millions of school children that travel by school bus to school every day. It's a safe, important way for them to get to school. And I think the number's 25 million roughly, but we've only cleaned up the school buses that deliver about 2 to 3 million, I think, of those school children. So we have a lot of work to do to try to continue to build from these kind of community partnerships and make sure that every child is riding in a school bus that has sort of the benefits of these cleaner technologies and these clean air solutions. So, and a lot of that is just a really joint collaboration, community-based, but also trying to leverage these resources that are being provided federally to make sure the communities have the support they need to effectuate this change. The technologies are there. It's a matter of resources and trying to sort of create the opportunity to effectuate that change.
Surely, retrofitting those buses are green jobs. Is there a timeline for how long that might take before?
It's a big part of what, there's a coalition of public health and environmental groups and diesel engine makers are pursuing sort of in DC, and that is how do we make sure that we continue to build out this funding for the Diesel Emissions Reduction Act federally and state and local funding programs like the Carl Moyer program in California. Texas has a program, the Texas Emission Reduction Program, the TERP program they call it. How do we sort of build out support in every way we can to leverage dollars that are available? There are times when under our nation's clean air laws, there are enforcement actions, and it's part of some of the settlements in those enforcement actions. Some of the prosecutors are now saying, we want sort of that money to be set aside, those penalties to go back into the community and to help finance the cleanup of things like diesel school buses. So people are trying to be creative, but we need good ideas about how we can leverage every dollar we can to deliver cleaner, healthier air.
You write your congressman in support of these kinds of programs. It's a good use of your tax dollars.
So can diesel be a sustainable green technology?
Diesel, I would argue, already is a sustainable green technology. There's no more efficient way to get goods moved from point A to point B. Near zero NOx and particulate matter, and we're continuing to work on technologies that reduce our fuel consumption. We recently won the EPA's Clean Air Excellence Award for a D7E electric drive tractor. It has, was I would say a real milestone, was to be a recipient of that kind of award. It reduces fuel consumption depending upon who's driving the tractor between 10 and 30%. From its predecessor model, and you can almost bank on that. Whatever fuel consumption you get almost drops 1-to-1 for when it comes to greenhouse gas. So, I think we already are a green technology, and we're working even. We haven't backed off, and we're going to continue that going forward. And why? Back to what our previous speakers said. It's money. It's about money and being more efficient.
And then where does it lie on the spectrum of, there's a lot of alternative fuels and alternative technologies for vehicles. Is diesel just one of the kind of portfolios of ways that we can power tomorrow? Yeah, it is, and I guess I'll go to one of my favorite topics, and I think it's so exciting. I hope you guys are excited about it too, and it's natural gas. We are really essentially, here the Saudi Arabia of natural gas, and it's a nice, clean technology, and the same basic reciprocating engine with some modification can burn that natural gas. It can help to improve our energy security, reduce our reliance on other sources, and is also very environmentally friendly. So this is a platform that has an awful lot of legs. I think if you'd go back to, Vickie said we started this journey, all of us, 20 years ago maybe, people would have said, oh my gosh, is diesel going to survive? And at the time, I remember being young and having a ponytail and naturally blonde hair, and I saw the emissions regulations were on the books, and I thought, I hope, and could see what was coming on the books. I thought, I think I'm going to get out of this industry, and hopefully I'm going to be retired before we have to get there. Because I'm not sure, I didn't know how to get there, and neither did most people, but we've really proven ourselves capable of that. It's been a big challenge, but we really have ourselves in the pace, I'd say, of becoming more and more green. And tell me about Caterpillar. Oh, sorry, do you want to chip in there?
Just a
Vickie?
couple of comments. On the natural gas, there are also a lot of important community-based concerns about how gas is extracted in communities, and we really need to work together as a country to solve those problems. There are discharges to air, land, and water that are of enormous importance, and as the nation sort of shifts to dependence on gas, and there's a big shift underway in the power sector from coal to gas happening before our very eyes, it's really critical that we put in place kind of the comprehensive protections that are necessary to address the impacts on air, land, and water and communities. They're also, in thinking about sort of diesel and its future, I think there's an enormous amount of opportunity, Sarah, for some of the progress that's been made in our country to be partnered with the rest of the world in many respects. Secretary of Clinton sort of announced a big initiative in February, and it's really a big initiative about collaborating with other parts of the world about some of the most urgent problems we face globally. And that is the impacts of a changing climate that are unfolding before our very eyes. And she laid out kind of this idea of our country working with other countries to try to address some of the most potent climate accelerants. And one of the many benefits of reducing the particulates from diesel is not only that it means healthier, longer lives, but it also means that those particles that are depositing from some of the northern parts of the world onto the Arctic could be reduced. And so imagine a world where you took this sort of advanced diesel engine technology and you worked with other countries to deploy it in megacities to deliver healthier, safer air, and you also deployed it in a way that helped slow the dire melting in the Arctic. And so can there be sort of broader sort of solutions where some of these advanced technologies that have been pioneered in this country become a foundation for a partnership in helping to address the challenges that really threaten the thin layer of atmosphere that sustains life on Earth?
And that is, back to the community idea. It takes a whole ecosystem in order to support and deploy that technology. We have been very giving, at least in our company, Caterpillar, in working with regulators in, say, China, in helping them understand as you regulate emissions, here's how that's done. Here's the building blocks that are necessary. And one of the really essential elements that prevents us from sending some of this technology overseas, say to developing markets like that, is fuel sulfur. Right now the technology relies on ultra-low sulfur diesel fuel, and that's really only available in the developed economies. And I would actually, as a chief technology officer, as one of his responsibilities is to leverage technology for the benefit of the environment and customer value. I'd love nothing more than to be able to have that fuel available. Because in that big investment we've made in meeting these emissions regulations, it could be leveraged.
What about the rest of the world? You cited China, but is the rest of the world moving towards a clean diesel future as well?
It's varying. I guess that's my perspective. When we talk about emissions levels for diesels, there's different tiers. And you can think of tier 0 as being bigger, and then we're today down at tier 4 kind of levels. If you look at a map of the world, there are some parts of it that are colored white. There's no regulations. Some are at tier 2, some at tier 3, and then some at tier 4. And if you take a look at the next, what we think is going to happen the next 5 years, we think more of those countries are going to be adopting higher tiered emission standards. So we see them going that way. But I guess I'd like to make a comment on the role of those, back to the idea of the community, the role of those leaders. They view it as their responsibility to balance the needs for Social Security, employment, and the environment, and a number of other factors at the same time. And over time, I think we're going to see, I'm hopeful we'll see some kind of homologation of emissions regulations. But I think, and it's happening, but it's going to take a while. I mean, I think I don't know, what do you think?
Well, it's this place, can you sort of reach a place of convergence where you're really optimizing the public health protections, the reductions in climate pollutants and fuel efficiency, and through these sort of advances in technologies. And that is, I think, the great hope. Yesterday, Secretary of Transportation Ray LaHood and EPA Administrator Lisa Jackson announced a big new initiative, transformative greenhouse gas emission standards for America's automobiles that will sort of lay out a decadal sort of trajectory for our country to effectively sort of double our fuel economy between now and 2025. And the results will be less pollution. Indeed, it'll reduce as much climate pollution, 6 billion tons over the life of the program, as our country emits from all of its sources. It'll reduce our dependence on foreign oil by about 2 million barrels a day. That's half of what we import from OPEC as a country. And it will save families money at the gas pump at a time when families are counting dollars and they matter enormously. And the question is, can we achieve those kinds of big, profound gains with the same sort of collaboration that has been devoted in protecting human health from some of the other contaminants from diesel? Can you imagine sort of a convergence and breakthrough in technology and policy where we're delivering those kinds of technologies to the rest of the world in a partnership?
I think we're in a transition phase, and it's going to take a while for these different parties that are engaged, industry, the regulators, the people to provide the infrastructure to find the right recipe so that more of that homologation can happen.